Children of hoarders. When did your parents go beyond the point of no return? My grandmother was a hoarder, but only with food. She would buy in bulk and never throw anything away, even if it was past the expiration date. When we visited, we would very quietly throw some things away and not tell her. There was a jar of pickles in her fridge that was older than me. I'm 27. She did it because she grew up in extreme poverty and neglect. Her mother would just abandon her and her siblings for days, and they would be reduced to digging through trash to eat. When she grew up, she made sure that there would always be food available. This is a thing about children of the Great Depression. My grandmother was happy as a clam when she found out about big box stores like Costco. So much food, most of it inedible and way past due. I lived with my mum and my grandmother, who were both hoarders. The point of no return began when my grandmother got divorced and moved into a smaller house. That's when the "there's no room for anything" excuse became a thing. I think it's just because my grandmother loves shopping. It's her hobby. She will go to places like Kmart and Big Lots and look at their sale shelves for the best deals and get basically whatever is on the shelf. She forgets what she buys too. On multiple occasions, she'll buy me the same book twice, and for Christmas, she literally gets me whole garbage bags worth of small dumb stuff that was on sale. Women's socks in this case. She even apologizes because there were more presents, but she'd lost them. So decades of losing things results in massive piles of forgotten crap, and she's afraid to just have me or some company go through it because her precious items might be in there. I have a diamond necklace somewhere in there. She hasn't seen that necklace in 20 years. I noticed my dad was over the edge when every cardboard box that entered the house was not allowed to leave because I can't find a use for it. And we also at one point had 14 miniature schnauzers in a single-story suburban house because we don't have one in that color yet. God, the animal hoarding really gets to me. My mother-in-law had to have a chihuahua in every color. Never took the time to potty train any of them and never really paid much attention to them. But she had one in every color. Those poor dogs. Dated a girl whose parents were both established hoarders. In fact, they both already had separate homes and never lived together, because each home was already packed with their respective stuff. That's starting out beyond the point of no return. I should note that although we dated exclusively for 7 months, she'd never invite me back to her place, saying, "It's just a bunch of boxes." I have a feeling that she had the hoarding thing going on as well. In my experience, children of hoarders either hold on to everything or hold on to nothing. I can imagine that after growing up there, you'd either accept it as the normal way of life or completely reject your parents' ways, as many children are wont to do. Must feel very liberating going from smelly, claustrophobic madness to a clinical, empty flat. My mother was a hoarder. I don't know when it started. It was well established by the time I was born. She had been forced to give up 2 babies for adoption in her teens, with rumors unconfirmed that it was a close family member that was the father. After that, it always seemed that she spent the rest of her life trying to fill up the hole that those 2 babies left in her heart. She had 6 more children of her own, plus adopted a 7th, me. And then she just started collecting random homeless people and giving them a place to stay. Our house was a typical hoarder's house, filthy and wall-to-wall with junk piled and stacked. It was a horrible embarrassment, and I wonder sometimes how I'd be different if I'd been raised in a normal home. After we kids were grown, sometimes we would come in collectively and do a massive cleanup of the house, and I can still remember the look of sadness and grief on my mum's face when she would sit and watch passively as we carried off all of her piles of junk. And then she would hide as much junk as she could, to keep us from getting rid of it all. That's when I realized she had a weird dysfunctional attachment to this stuff that normal people don't feel. Prior to that, I'd always just thought of her as lazy or maybe just horribly ignorant of how to organize things. As I understand it in my mother, it was loss. The terrible sense of loss and helplessness she felt in having her babies taken from her. She just couldn't cope with that, and in her mind, keeping things and other people was a way of avoiding loss. It was a comfort to her to have things and people, but never really enough to fulfill her, so she had to always have more. Like an addiction, I guess. I had another thought. As I mentioned, I am adopted. I have various dysfunctions, but no tendency towards hoarding. Both of my sisters, though, who were her natural daughters, have that tendency as well. In times of high stress in their lives, I've seen them start to hoard things and fill up their homes. Fortunately, they have a better network of support and a less traumatic past than my mother had, so they haven't crossed over into the point of no return phase. I just find it interesting that there appears to be a genetic element to hoarding. Dated a girl with a hoarder mum. Their full-size basement, over 2,000 square feet, was always wall-to-wall with just stuff, with a little path to get to the washer and dryer. It didn't creep into the upstairs until the first son moved away. Girlfriend had 2 older brothers, and then the brothers' room was filled with dollar store stuff and old clothes. The other brother graduated and moved out, and his room was filled with junk. Then the marriage started to fall apart, and that's the state I saw it in. Then the entry hall was floor-to-ceiling with boxes with about a 2-foot wide path that took you to the living room or right to the bedrooms. The couch was clear with about a 3-foot path in front of it. Racks of clothes stacked with boxes. Lots and lots of unopened dollar store toys. All of her kids were older than 18 and no grandkids. The kitchen was stacked with piles of old newspapers. Only about 2 open spots to eat at the kitchen table. I broke up with her daughter just before she moved out, so I don't know how it ended. I'm guessing not well. This sounds like my in-laws. The kids' rooms were turned into storage one by one as they moved out. It went from stuff they didn't want to throw out to the contents of their parents' houses when they passed away because they couldn't get rid of or sell anything. Now they go to estate sales regularly looking for cheap things to give their kids. They absolutely have good finds once in a while, but for the most part, the stuff is in piles in unused rooms, bedrooms, closets, and wherever else they find. I got laid off, so I took some time to go and clean out my partner's old room. Day 1, I had about 5 full trash bags that I left to go and get some food. I returned to the house to see her going through the trash bags. That's when I realized how bad the problem really was. Not my parents, but my grandmother. After her husband died, she started buying all kinds of things she didn't need. My parents live 8 hours away from her, and her other daughter is sick and can't drive, so no one knew how bad stuff was getting. Now, we knew she had those tendencies, we knew that she bought a lot of stuff, and we knew she didn't clean very well. But we had no idea how bad it actually was. She had a stroke in January and she wanted to be in her own home. So my aunt, the one who can't take care of herself, moved in to try and help her get back on her feet. Predictably, this was a terrible idea. She lasted 6 weeks. During this time, I drove up to visit and was absolutely appalled. They were eating delivery every night because the kitchen was unusable. Just piles of crap that covered all the counters and stove. We later found out that the stove didn't even work, and blocking you from even entering the kitchen. All over the house there was just trash and crap. And oh god, the mice. So many mice. I think I saw a snake too. I told my aunt at that time that she needed to get grandmother help. Keep in mind that my aunt really couldn't even take care of herself, and she kept insisting they were fine. When I got back home, I called my mum and told her how bad it was. She was in the process of taking off from work when my aunt and grandmother had a terrible falling out. So my mum and dad went over there to take over. I drove up to help and we spent an entire weekend cleaning out 2 bedrooms. Yes, it took an entire weekend for 2 bedrooms. She had 35 Christmas stockings that still had the tags on them. She had probably had 10 years of newspapers in her living room, and when I was there, I offered to take some of them out. She got really upset and flustered and kept telling me no, she was going to go through them. Seriously, 10 years. That's when I started to realize it wasn't just mess, there was something really psychologically wrong. She got really agitated just by anyone being in her house, but to be honest, she's always been like that. When my sister and I were younger, the family would stay at their house when we visited, but she'd never give us the key. If we came back from visiting other relatives and Oma and Opa weren't at the house when we got there, we had to either go somewhere or wait in the car till they got home and let us in. So we really weren't too surprised that she didn't want anyone in her house. Once we realized the reason, I think it was because she knew how bad it was, though she actively denies it. Just being in the house for more than 10 minutes, our eyes started watering and our noses got really congested. It was clearly a really unhealthy environment. The amount of mouse scat we cleaned out of the cabinets was probably a biohazard. We should have worn the masks from the bathroom, but we'd already thrown them out. She ended up having to go home because she couldn't stay by herself, and no one can stay in that house. She had a live-in nurse for a very short time, and that person was like, "What the heck?" and quit. We still haven't finished the house, and to be honest, probably never will. Thanks for listening, it really is helpful to write out. Gosh, this was actually really cathartic. I don't know if any of our listeners are getting the Lady Macbeth-like compulsion to scrub their skin clean until it's raw. Doing these stories for so long is making the narrator feel dirty. During my 20s, Dad developed traits he hadn't exhibited before, including hoarding. He had an undiagnosed tumor in his right temporal lobe. That's an area of the brain responsible for high-level functions, motivation, prioritization, a few other things. He literally didn't know when he was finished reading the newspaper, so he kept years of newspapers stacked in his place. He was terrified of losing something important if anything got thrown away. What finally got him on track to proper treatment was a CT scan. Obviously, hoarding has many different causes. This cause is rare. But in case it helps anyone listening, other symptoms included deterioration in various organizing skills, and he gradually developed a short temper. The condition went undiagnosed until it impaired his spatial skills and his balance. This type of ailment usually gets diagnosed because of headaches or seizures, which aren't present in every instance. Dad got his diagnosis late in the game. He wouldn't have survived another month without treatment. In technical terms, it was a 5.5 cm grade 4 astrocytoma with a 10 mm midline shift. Surgery and radiation therapy brought him 2 years, and most of that was quality time, which was as good as medical science could do. Since then, a new medicine called Temodar has been approved to treat that condition, so outcomes are a little better now. It was still a very rough diagnosis. He was disabled for the rest of his life, but his thinking was somewhat clearer. In layman's terms, there was healthy but swollen tissue that returned to normal function. On the other hand, if you're able to get someone diagnosed while they still have a grade 1 or grade 2 astrocytoma, then the outcome can be much better. Only about 16,000 Americans each year develop primary brain tumors, so don't worry too much. Yet, if someone reading this notices sudden hoarding behavior in a relative, along with hand tremors and personality changes, it would be worth asking a doctor whether diagnostic tests are appropriate. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I think it was when my dad left, about 15 years into their marriage. I grew up in a messy house, but not hoarder-level messy. I know my dad cleaned up a lot too. After my parents got divorced, my mum went off the rails. Depressed and lashing out and no cleaning. It was a while ago, so I was pretty young, but I think this is also when she started buying excessive amounts of stuff and never throwing anything out. I know she doesn't feel like her job has much value, so I think she derives a lot of satisfaction from buying gifts for people. She used to go through our trash at night and wake us up screaming if we'd thrown anything out that could be useful again. As bad as it got after my dad left, my siblings and I still used to clean all the time, so it wasn't horrendous. We'd periodically clean out the fridge and clean rooms of the house. After we all moved out, it got really, really bad. Just piles of crap completely covering every surface. She still buys way too much crap and gets furious if we try to stop her. I receive boxes of stuff all the time as gifts and I just donate it immediately. I don't even want to thank her for it, for fear that she'll start buying more as gifts. As a result, I've worked pretty hard to be a tidy person and throw out stuff on the regular. I freaking hated growing up in that mess, and I would never date a girl who was messy at all. Just don't want to risk raising kids in the same environment where I grew up. As an addendum, I've noticed a lot of children of hoarder parents feel hurt or resentful that their parents chose their stuff over them. I don't feel this way at all. I know she's incapable of cleaning. I don't see her learning how to do that for me or my siblings for anything. I've watched her spend hours trying to clean even one area of the couch, sobbing with frustration and not even being able to do it. Honest question. As people who've had personal experiences with hoarding, what's your opinion of the TLC show Hoarders? Do you find it offensive, or do you think it makes others more empathetic because they can see that it's a mental illness? I too watch it if it's on, and I see it as I'm channel surfing. I see the show as somewhat exploitative, but it also gives me insight into my own parents' lives together, and it helps me understand my mum's compulsions a little better, and hopefully curb my own. I'm not good at throwing things away either, and have a tendency towards storing things that I don't have any use for. My mum hoarded after her parents died. She was unable to let go of any of their things, and it just got worse and worse. She was already a clutterbug, making numerous copies of every single piece of paper that she thought was important to family history. She was a genealogist, and buying multiple copies of newspapers, books, and things that had anything in them about our family members, her genealogical work, and the towns where our families originated. My dad, bless his heart, is still cleaning out from under all her stuff, more than 3 years after her death. It's hard on him. He describes the piles and boxes and file cabinets as time bombs, because without fail, as he's going through pounds upon pounds of useless papers, he'll find something important, touching, or really valuable. Pieces of her jewelry, photos of her as a young woman, letters from people long passed away that should be saved. It's just incredible the minutiae she thought were important, and the important things she thought weren't worth much. They're exactly the opposite of what we see as valuable or not. Mine were beyond the point of no return when they got their 12th cat. Poor kitties. As damaging as hoarding can be to the people doing it, the fact that it can wildly affect their kids and pets is possibly the most tragic part. Most animals that you see in rescues who come from hoarding situations are wildly traumatized. My mother owned 3 small businesses. During the financial crisis of 2008, the bank recalled the business loan. She refused to deal with the loss and has now idealized that time in her life as the best thing that ever happened to her, even though it was awful for pretty much everyone because how she mishandled her finances so badly and put the family in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anyway, imagine having the inventory of 3 Walgreens, Her businesses had nothing to do with pharmacies, but they have a similar level of inventory. All the hallways, the bedrooms, the living room, family room, dining, kitchen, and the others are totally unusable. Boxes and loose mountains of product are stacked higher than your head. You can only sleep on half of your bed because the other half is covered in stuff, and to access the bed you have to climb up and over stacks of boxes. You live in constant fear that the family pets are going to dislodge something and be buried alive. You live in fear that you are going to be buried alive. That's what life was like for 7.5 years. No amount of therapy or medication or throwing things away. We once brought a dumpster to the house and got rid of an entire bedroom full of junk, but she replaced it within a week. Or any serious talks about any change of her behavior. For unrelated reasons, my parents got divorced this year. A stipulation of the divorce was that she and her stuff had to vacate the home. Instead of hiring moving trucks, she was doing 2 or 3 trips daily with her minivan. My dad had to get a court order forcing her to move the stuff, and the judge made my dad vacate the premises because my mum insisted that he was the problem. It took a fleet of U-Hauls and 24 hours going hard to remove all her stuff. She's happy with all of her stuff. She chose it over her family over and over again. It was always more important than us, more important than our safety and health. I wish that she loved me more than she loves a box of expired product that hasn't been opened since 2008, but she doesn't, and I've spent a lot of time in therapy dealing with that. I'm so sorry. That really is one of the most emotionally hard things about living with a hoarder. It's miserable dealing with the physical aspects, the filth, danger, and waste, but the emotional aspect of coming in a distant second to useless crud is so much worse. My mum is a chronic hoarder and refuses to throw anything away and is constantly buying new stuff. Food, clothes, dishes, blankets and paintings, magazines, you name it. I bet I can dig through a pile at home and find it. She buys food from a discount market and everything else from thrift stores because she can't pass up such a good deal. She grew up on a farm where they didn't have it that bad. Her dad made a lot of money, but he was a hoarder too. When he died, we cleared out 3 sheds of pure junk from the farm. I may have had my point of no return yesterday. December 26th. I was at my parents' house cooking with my mum, and she said, "Can you get me the milk from the fridge?" I opened the fridge and the first thing I saw front and center was a big block of moldy cheese. I asked where the milk is and my mum said, "Oh, it's in the back." I lost it. If the first thing I see is moldy cheese, then by my logic, the milk at the back is going to be crap. I started grabbing open containers and throwing them at the trash. Tomato paste with a thick cap of mold, a Tupperware with green crab meat, a plastic container with dark green guacamole. Anything I thought looked like it was spoiled. My mum freaked out and ran over to the garbage saying, "This is still good! This is still good!" While picking things out of the trash, I just looked at her, dropped the container I had in my hand on the floor, and walked over to the couch where I remained for the next 6 hours, waiting for my ride to get there. I just couldn't stand it anymore. My father-in-law is a hoarder. I have to purge things at home to keep my wife from falling into this. For him, he sees value in everything. He won't part with anything. It's like cutting out his soul to clean out the trash. He has 30-year-old catalogs from companies that don't exist. We've had to clean out his kitchen, bathrooms, and living areas annually. The big problem is he's a farmer with tons of space, barns, sheds, and a very large house. We're dreading the day he passes away. Not for the loss, but the mess we'll have to address before we liquidate his house. You probably already do this, but be careful with your purges and your wife. A common, well-known trigger for hoarding is someone or something else taking one's possessions away. We've had the talk several times, and I'm gentle. I found out that if we do it as a weekly task, it has become routine and she deals with it easier. Never just out of the blue instantly, "Time to purge." I make sure that she takes responsibility with what she purges as far as personal stuff goes. Newspapers are an automatic throwout. I would like to cancel the paper, but she wants to hang on to it. I have the opposite problem. My mum is a minimalist. She's also emotionally remote, and growing up, all love was conditional. I think she wanted the appearance of a perfect household and a perfect life. Any grade less than 90% was punished and bathrooms were cleaned out twice a week. So she'd go through the house and throw out anything that was out of place. Our house was sterile and cold. The only memories I have left of my childhood are a single photo album that she puts in the basement and anything that I've managed to squirrel away. She has thrown everything away from my dad's childhood and has 3 pictures from hers. I go into a panic when I can't find anything because growing up it meant that she had snatched it. I find myself accumulating stuff, now being an adult, because I'm comforted by things being around me. I can't be attacked when my back is against a hard surface. She gave me a copy of that awful life-saving magic of cleaning up for Christmas. Thanks, Mum. Something I can respond to. My mum was always very messy before I was born, but it wasn't anything crazy. My father cheated on her because she could be very manipulative and, well, she's just crazy. Anyway, he left her with 4 kids, paid child support, but not much else. I think she just felt like she lost everything. Lost her home, lost her life, just lost it. She gets knocked up, with me, from some rebound guy she was dating, and that ended quickly. So it's me, my brother, and 3 sisters. Fast forward a few years and we have 117 cats in a 3-bedroom house. My mum sleeps in one room with me and my sisters cram into another bedroom. My brother sleeps on the floor because obviously the 3rd bedroom became the spare room, which was crammed floor to ceiling with old clothes and toys. Then it just started spiraling from there. Fast forward another few years and there were garbage bags of old tattered clothing everywhere in the house, garbage bags of actual garbage, stacks of newspapers, and oh gosh, those fricking TV guides. Ugh, frick those TV guides. And of course, lots of cats and cat poo, cat pee, and dead cats. Also, we could always tell how long we'd lived somewhere by how many dead Christmas trees there were in the house. We had to cover up the windows with cardboard to make sure the neighbors couldn't see in. Friends weren't allowed over, and in case you're wondering, yes, being raised under constant fear of others finding out you're a secret monster does in fact lead to some incredibly debilitating intimacy issues. But it did give me some heart-wrenching crap to write about in my college application essays. Hello, Stanford. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.